So, I just got back from watching TRON Ares. And I just want to say that despite the opinion of pretty much everyone I've talked to, I didn't hate this movie. Now, let me preface this by saying it's not flawless, obviously. It's not even great because they completely ignored pretty much the entirety of Tron Legacy. The movie that this one is supposed to take place after, they kind of just act like it didn't happen aside from a line at the very beginning and another line right in the middle and a picture right at the end. They basically completely ignore everything that happened in Tron Legacy. So, that's my biggest gripe with the film, is the fact that we spent the entirety of Tron Legacy building up the importance of the ISOs and how devastating it would be for a malicious program to get to our world. And yet the entire premise of Tron Ares is about bringing things from the grid to our world. Now, obviously, if you want to dive super deep into that concept of bringing these humanoid-looking yet superhuman strength, superhuman speed, superhuman perception programs into our world, that has some really hard to grasp. It brings up some questions that you're just like, how does this even work? But if you take it at its face value that this is just something that can happen, then it is a much more enjoyable movie. Yes, it's one of those you have to just accept. Some people say, turn your brain off, like just sit there brain in hand and drink in the pretty colors. I don't like watching movies like that. Fine. This is a movie that you're not supposed to dig all the way down to the core of it in the pursuit of finding everything wrong with it. Tron Ares is another basically reboot to the Tron series, and this one has even less Tron in it, Tron the character, than Tron Legacy did, if you can believe that. Considering, spoilers for a 15-year-old movie, the character of Rinsler turns out to be Tron. And, you see Tron as he is at the beginning of Tron Legacy, and then at the very end he switches back to the side of good and becomes Tron again. And then they tease that he's not dead. And then we literally don't see this guy at all for the entirety of Tron Ares. So, what else? I'm getting the bad out of the way first. The writing is atrocious. The line delivery is god awful. Not going to sugarcoat it. But that's pretty much par for the course for the Tron franchise at this point. Tron 1982, Tron Legacy kind of had the whole... It had its identity in amazing visuals, but people not at all reacting the way they should to the situations they get put in. So I can forgive the main human cast being incredibly weak. I can forgive pretty much every program being stiff and robotic, because they pretty much are. And I can even say that out of everything I've seen him in, this is the least painful Jared Leto performance I've ever watched. Like, granted, I really want Ares to take a fucking shower, considering that the entire movie, anytime he's not wearing his helmet, his hair looks so greasy it looks like I could like wring his hair out and have enough bacon grease to last me a year. But he gives a decent performance as Ares, as this program that's slowly learning how to be human. So, the good of the movie, absolutely, also in keeping with Tron, the visuals are incredible. 1982's Tron was literally denied even being put forward for the Oscar for Best Visual Effects because the Academy said it was cheating using computers. And then Tron Legacy, to this day, still looks absolutely stunning. And if you're lucky enough to own a copy of Tron Evolution, you know that that game still looks way better than half the shit that comes out today. This movie takes place both in three separate grids, actually, as well as elements of the grids being brought to reality. And all the Tron elements, all the grid computer elements look fantastic. Incredibly fantastic in the few instances we're on the grid, but also when Tron elements are in real life, they superimpose them incredibly well. I did not ever feel like the uncanny valley that people love to latch onto for Tron Legacy with the original Kevin Bridges de-aging. Now, the story is an incredibly weak story. I'm going to get into spoilers now, so before I get into spoilers, let me just say that if you liked either of the Tron movies, it's surprisingly easy for someone who's a fan of both the original two Tron movies and most of the Tron video games. It was surprisingly easy for me to put aside my personal dislikes from the decisions that the story writers wrote and just take the movie at face value, act like it's either almost a brand new IP or at the very least yet another soft reboot, and just be like, okay. And, it feels like they're trying to do what they did with Star Wars, but there's less backstory to fuck up. Like, they did fuck up backstory, don't get me wrong, but it's less egregious because Tron isn't as beloved as Star Wars, as shitty as that is to say. So, spoiler time. Gonna go through the beats of the movie. We get a similar backstory like we did in Tron Legacy, with Flynn explaining what the grid is. In this movie, the rival company to Flynn's company, Encom, which is Dillinger something. Just Dillinger. We're just going to call it Dillinger. Dillinger was a big problem in the first movie. It's a big problem in this movie. It wasn't really a problem in Legacy. Right off the bat, we learn that Flynn's son, Sam, who at the end of Legacy said that he was going to step up and become, the head of Encom, take over his father's legacy and fix the company. We find out that for, direct quote, personal reasons, he has stepped down from being the CEO of Encom, which under his leadership fell on hard financial times. Enter in two completely random yet savant-level Asian sisters who completely turned the company around, completely revitalize its video game department, and just absolutely save the company. So, typical Disney DEI, femme boss got a girl boss, women get it done, I am woman, hear me roar, stinky man can't do anything right. We're then introduced to the grandson of the Dillinger's CEO from the first movie. His grandson is now the CEO of Dillinger. And of course, again, typical DEI, millennial-aged white guy whose sole focus is on creating military tools and weapons and making a shit ton of money off of the military-industrial complex. You know, aka generic Disney bad guy number 6,000,000,033. The main hook of this movie is that both Encom and Dillinger have found a way to take the reversal process of the laser that gets you into the grid. You know, it's not just enough that they have a laser that can zap a human and transcribe flesh, bone, and all the organic bits that make us who we are and keep us alive on the digital frontier of the grid. That's not even enough. Now both companies have a laser that's capable of taking digital stuff that doesn't physically exist, and quite literally, magically, make it real. Of course, Dillinger's soy boy CEO is making weapons. The movie starts with him literally creating Ares and then training him through AI training programs to become the ultimate warrior, and then makes Ares the master security program of Dillinger's entire grid. And that is actually, well, hold on. And so that's what Dillinger's making. He's making tanks, he's making even stronger recognizers, newer versions of the light cycles and the light gliders that are completely weaponized and completely militarized. The way he puts it is, you need warfighting capability, this is it, with a 5-minute notice. Meanwhile, Encom, which of course is being run by empathetic Asian woman, is trying to use it to create super sustainable trees that can produce food for areas that can't produce food very easily. They can synthesize medicines on the grid that they can then de-virtualize to the real world and help people that are sick. You know, all the humanitarian shit. Guarantee you somebody at Encom would get a offer from the Pentagon that had enough zeros to make them slap their logo on a couple of weapons. Guarantee you. But on a small note, the iconic, and I'm going to call it iconic, the triangular identity disc that we see Ares using, that is a signifier that he is the master security program for Dillinger. That's so you can differentiate him from the rest of the Dillinger programs throughout the movie, because Dillinger codes every single one of his programs in red, obviously, because, you know, red, bad guy. But in order to be able to tell Ares apart from the rest of them, he has the triangular identity disk. Now, the big problem, the main hook of the movie is that, yes, both Encom and Dillinger can virtualize or de-virtualize things from the grid to the real world. We see Dillinger de-virtualize a tank with Ares piloting it. We see Asian CEO lady de-virtualize an orange tree. The thing is, for some reason, the de-virtualization to real-life process comes with a 29-minute timer. As soon as those 29 minutes hit, the construct in real life de-reses to a pile of ash on the floor. And the MacGuffin of the movie is that somehow Kevin Flynn, all the way back in 1980 figured out this problem and managed to fix it on his original floppy disk drive computers, with a whole 1.8 megabytes, not even gigabytes, 1.44 megabytes of RAM, managed to craft the code needed to make stuff brought from the grid to real life permanent, that it wouldn't dissolve to ash in 29 minutes. And that's the central focal point of the movie, is that right off the bat, Encom CEO lady finds the code hidden in a couple of floppy disks in a cabin that Flynn had in Alaska. And almost immediately after she finds it, Dillinger's CEO starts spying on her, sends Ares and his team into Encom's grid to find every single file he can about Encom CEO lady. Ares starts developing maybe feelings for her after being exposed to so much of her personal data. We find out that Dillinger has created one of the virtualization lasers, the one that can get you to a grid, in a rifle form that can be taken as far away from the Dillinger headquarters as you want and still wirelessly beam somebody from real life to the Dillinger grid. They do this to Asian CEO lady because she has physically seen the code on the CRT monitor of Flynn's computer, and through her identity disk they can extract the code, but of course doing so runs the risk of killing her. Dillinger doesn't give a flying fuck about that. Ares does. He helps her get out of the grid, which, was the main point of both the first and second movies, took up the majority of the runtime, was fighting through the grid to get to the exit portal. Now she's on the grid for less than 5 minutes. Kinda sucks. But Ares strikes a deal with her. He says, I get you off the grid, you take me back to the real world. You get me to Encom, get me onto Flynn's server, which is different from Encom's server, because that's where the permanence code is. I get the permanence code, and then I get to live my life free from a creator that sees me as nothing more than an expendable weapon, kind of like a Tediore gun from Borderlands. Long story short, through lots of shenaniganry, Ares winds up on one of the cooler parts of the movie, Flynn's grid, which is a faithful but updated version of the grid from the 1982 movie, complete with a binary bit that goes yes, a classic version of the light cycle, and that really unique fuzzy filter that made the neon glow of the grid stand out even more. Ares goes in there, gets to meet with maybe a projection, maybe the actual Flynn. Ares explains that he's basically become human, and Flynn uploads the permanence code to Ares' disk. So now he can live outside of the grid for longer than 29 minutes, but he's essentially human now. So if he dies, it's game over. He doesn't get to respawn. Now, the other antagonist of the movie is the lady from The Acolyte, the angry lesbian space witch. She is named Athena, and she is basically everything that angry Dillinger CEO wanted: a completely loyal program who follows their directive to a T, to the point that when she gets materialized in real life and upgraded to head of security after Ares betrays Dillinger, she uses her spiky triangular disc to murder Dillinger's mother. Because Dillinger said, get me Asian CEO lady under no matter what it takes, get her back to our grid so we can extract the code and make all of our weapons permanent. That's his whole goal. Athena will keep running out of time, obviously, or she can potentially die, but as long as Dillinger's server is up, she can just continually respawn. It's like, having an unlimited lives code in a video game. When Ares gets back to reality, he has a final fight with Athena, has some words, beats her. She dereses after the NCOM humans manage to shut down Dillinger's grid. NCOM uses the permanence code to, make the world a better place. Meanwhile, Dillinger's spineless ass uses his lasers to zap himself to his destroyed grid. All's well that ends well. Ares is now down in Mexico looking for Sam and Cora. And the mid-credit scene, we see Dillinger on his destroyed grid where an identity disc pops up, and it's one of the bullseye frisbees from the first movie. Turns out it still contains the digital soul of General Sark from the first movie, and begins taking over the young Dillinger's body. Obviously, two setups for a potential sequel that, unfortunately, I don't think we're ever going to get. Or at the very least, it'll be another 15 to 30 years before we do. However, I will say, barring all the cringe writing, the complete disregard for the previous movies, or not the previous movies, but the complete disregard for Legacy, and the DEI aspects of male emasculation and woman empowerment just because she has ovaries, it actually was a fun movie carried heavily by its extreme beauty. The movie looks incredible. And I will say that nothing was ever going to top Daft Punk's legendary soundtrack from Legacy. And while I didn't like every single track that Nine Inch Nails did for Ares, when it hit, and it fit the scene. But there was way too much singing and not enough synth for this to feel like proper Tron music. So I'm going to say that the soundtrack was okay, but did not carry the movie the way that Legacy's did. Well, the Legacy was carried by A good story, not a great story, not a perfect story, but a good, if safe, story. But goddamn gorgeous visuals and an amazing, legendary soundtrack. Ares, its visuals are doing a hell of a lot more lifting than its soundtrack does, but when the soundtrack hits, it punches hard. So basically, to summarize, the bad is that the movie got modern Disney'd. But if you're a fan of the first two movies and are willing to accept that they fucked up what could have been a great continuation of Legacy, this does go in a good enough direction with a performance from Jared Leto that is the least painful of all of his attempts at becoming a big star. I know I'm putting a lot of caveats on it, but it's genuinely a fun time. I highly recommend it. Well, not highly, but I recommend it, even though I know a lot of people won't. This probably is the end of the line for Tron. But at least it's not going out on an absolute shit note. It's going out on a decent enough ending. And I guess with the alternative being we never got another Tron movie, it's good.